Now, making headlines this week was North Korean leader Kim Jongun's surprise visit to China.
It's to strengthen his own hand in advance of his meeting with President Trump.
China did not want to be sidelined, so it just wants to make sure that China's interest is protected.
The closest possible coordination between Seoul and Washington has to occur.
I don't think Washington and Seoul are in the same place in terms of what we are willing to really give to the North Koreans.
But the question is, are there steps that the U.S. and South Korea can take that would make their defensive posture seem less threatening?
There are reports that Kim Jong-un's visit to Russia is imminent.
Kim Jong-un is trying to buy some time here, wait out the Trump administration.
From the Voice of America, this is Washington Talk.
Hello, and thanks for joining us in this week's edition of Washington Talk. I'm Connie Kim, filling in for Eun-Jung Cho. Now, making headlines this week was North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's surprise visit to China ahead of his back-to-back summits with the presidents of South Korea and the United States. Months of icy relations between Pyongyang and Beijing appear to have suddenly thawed with the summit. Then going forward for the U.S., what does this mean for the Trump administration preparing for the U.S.-North Korea summit? We first give you a recap of Kim Jong-un's secret trip and how Washington responded.
在朝鲜半岛形势空前巨变的情况下，我本着推动半岛和平稳定。
Positive sign that the maximum pressure campaign is continuing to work, and we're going to continue moving forward in this process.
To get a deeper analysis into the future direction of Washington's North Korea policy, we're joined by two guests in the studio. Countryman is a former acting Undersecretary of State for Arms Control and International Security and is now the chairman of the Arms Control Association. Ms. Sumi Terry is a former CIA analyst who is now a senior fellow with the Korea Chair at Center for Strategic and International Studies. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having us.
Well, I want to start with Kim Jong-un's bold diplomatic strategy starting from this year. Kim Jong-un, what was Kim Jong-un's strategy? What was Kim Jong-un's purpose of visiting President Xi Jinping?
I think in brief, it's to strengthen his own hand in advance of his meeting with President Trump. He wants to demonstrate to the leadership in Beijing that he is serious about his intentions and that he's prepared to negotiate seriously, and in that way, to improve a very tense relationship between Beijing and Pyongyang.
And if we take a look at what Kim Jong-un told Xi Jinping during the summit, according to Chinese state media, he's reported to have said the issue of denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula can be resolved if South Korea and the United States create an atmosphere of peace while taking progressive and synchronous measures for the realization of peace. Now, there are various interpretations of what progressive and synchronous measures mean. What are your takes on this?
I think one of the key long-term goals of the North Korean regime for many decades has been to drive a wedge, to disrupt, even to end the alliance between the United States and South Korea, which Pyongyang sees both as a threat to its own regime and also sees as something that prevents unification under Pyongyang's control of the two Koreas. That is not going to happen, either in the short run or in the long run. So the question is, are there steps that the U.S. and South Korea can take that would make their defensive posture seem less threatening to the North? And if there are some such steps, then perhaps we could get to the beginning of a step-by-step process where both the U.S. and North Korea take steps to reduce the threat to each other.
But my concern is that I don't think Washington and Seoul are in the same place in terms of what we are willing to really give to the North Koreans. I mean, if there is a summit between Trump and Kim Jong-un before May, that's right around the corner. But I don't think we are in a space that we are willing to really give a whole lot of things away, including relaxation of sanctions or anything else. So I'm afraid that we're not going to be completely aligned, Seoul and Washington. We, U.S., has a little bit of a different expectation from what China expects, South Korea expects, or Japan expects. So I think coordinating all this will be a challenge.
Right.
And the role of South Korean diplomacy is crucial. I think the ROK has done an exceptionally good job diplomatically to get us to this point. The meeting between Kim Jong-un and President Moon will be crucial, and then the single most important step will be discussions between President Moon and President Trump about how to get to a realistic set of goals for the summit with Kim.
Now, Ms. Suri, you mentioned that North Korea is going to seek for relaxation of sanctions. Then is President Trump going to accept Kim Jong-un's proposal here?
Well, considering that we now have even more of hawkish national security team with John Bolton as a national security advisor, and we know how popular things, I'm not sure. I don't think so, because President Trump has even recently said we need to continue with maximum pressure. I think the Washington and this security team is very, very skeptical of North Korea's intentions. They think that North Korea is trying to buy time while they continue to work on the program. So I think we are trying to avoid the mistakes that we have made in the past, which is relaxing the sanctions a little bit too prematurely. So I think this is they're going to have some pushback here, and we're not going to be really relaxing sanctions too early.
I think it would be difficult for the president to move rapidly to relax sanctions in response to just words from Kim Jong-un. But the question is, when the president goes and states his maximum demands, and Kim does the same thing, they will not intersect. Does that mean the talks simply break down and President Trump says, well, I tried? Or do they continue and they try to find a way to close the gap and begin a process? That's what we really can't know. The appointment of John Bolton, who has the most antagonistic view of North Korea that anyone could have, makes me a little more skeptical, but I try to remain optimistic.
So far, Kim Jong-un has stated its commitment to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula, and it seems the U.S. and Pyongyang are a little different, are on different pages when it comes to this interpretation. What are your takes on this?
For the United States, it is something that is clear, absolute, requires North Korean action, and requires it in the very short term. For North Korea, I think they see it as the end point of a very long process. And it is a crucial question for the success of these talks, whether you can bridge those two very different concepts. And it's an important question also, what does Beijing think and what does Seoul think are the definitions of denuclearization?
When they, we keep hearing from the South Koreans, the North Koreans who are seeking now, they are into denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula. But what does that mean? Because we've heard that phrase before, denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula, right? It includes South Korea too, the U.S. extended nuclear umbrella over South Korea. That usually meant you need to get the U.S. forces off the Korean Peninsula, sort of the breaking of the alliance. So we're still not clear. And I think Xi Jinping was looking for some sort of clarity and some sort of policy coordination.
And exactly, one point I want to point out is that North Korea has been using South Korea and China in conveying its position to the upcoming summits. How do you think President Trump should interpret North Korea's intentions here?
I think he needs to hear directly from the leadership in Seoul and in Beijing as to what they've been hearing from the North Koreans. That's crucial. And the other essential part is to coordinate very closely with South Korea. The Republic of Korea is not a bystander. They are in the very center of this process, and it is their security that is affected by these negotiations more than anyone else's. So the closest possible coordination between Seoul and Washington has to occur.
And before we move on, there are reports that Kim Jong-un's visit to Russia is imminent. What do you think Kim Jong-un's purpose on this trip to Russia is going to be here?
I think you mentioned this earlier. North Korea is always trying to put a wedge between different parties. Let's get everybody involved and break up this international coalition against the Kim regime. There's a lot of pressure, so why not meet with the Russians? I think North Koreans are also going to meet with Abe, and they're going to probably dangle that abduction deal to the Japanese as well. So this kind of fits with Kim Jong-un's plan of now he's on this peace offensive phase, tactical shift. So yeah, sure, I can see that.
North Korea certainly would want to talk to Russia for all of the reasons that Dr. Terry just mentioned. I would add that Russia is not as important in the equation as China is, but Russia, as we have seen throughout the world, can be disruptive.
Yes.
And Russia will be looking to advance its own interests more than it will look to advance the success of the summit meeting.
100% agree with this.
And
they love to play a spoiler role. So.
Exactly.
And is Kim Jong-un trying to drag out the whole process of denuclearization talks by getting China and Russia involved in this whole framework?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I personally think Kim Jong-un is trying to buy some time here, wait out the Trump administration. So again, I think the timeline is going to be mismatched here. He's looking for a long negotiation process, but we, the United States, is looking for a more of a quick fix, trying to get a lot done within this Trump-Kim Jong-un summit.
And it seems that the Chinese government is pushing for the resumption of the stalled six-party denuclearization talks. How do you think President Trump is going to respond to Beijing's push?
The initial meeting between Trump and Kim Jong-un is, of course, bilateral. I think that South Korea hopes that at some point it may become trilateral to include the South as well. I'm certain that Mr. Trump would like to keep it as strictly bilateral. But if we are going to get to a successful long-term process to reduce tensions, it has to be eventually six-party talks again. Keep in mind that within the six-party talks in the past, one important aspect of that was that it provided a channel for the U.S. and North Korea to meet bilaterally under the framework of the six-party talks.
All right, we'll leave it here for now and move on to the next topic. We now take a closer look at China and North Korea relations. While the relationship between the two nations has plummeted to unprecedented lows in recent years, the recent summit between the North Korean and Chinese leaders reaffirms the importance of their long-standing relationship. President Xi Jinping treated Kim Jong-un to a lavish welcome. Can their alliance go deeper?
우리의 첫 상봉은 획기적인 이정표를 마련한 훌륭한 계기로 되었습니다.
So as we've just seen, President Xi has lavishly treated President Trump during their meeting. We've seen extensive motorcade. We've seen President Xi hosting a banquet and a luncheon to Kim Jong-un. Why has President Xi flattered Kim Jong-un so lavishly?
Because it works. The Chinese have figured out that if you're dealing with a leader who believes himself to be the most brilliant man in the world, whether it's Donald Trump or Kim Jong-un, if you appeal to his vanity with such lavish treatment, it helps you accomplish your goals. It's that simple.
What do you think Xi's motivation was here?
Right now, I think China did not want to be sidelined, so it just wants to make sure that China's interest is protected. Xi Jinping was looking to make sure that Kim Jong-un understands that China's interest needs to be considered here. I think this was a big coup for Kim Jong-un. Now he looks like a normal leader, a normal country, standing there with Xi Jinping. He brought his beautiful, attractive wife with high-level officials, the whole delegation. They had all these photo ops. So optics look great for Kim Jong-un. Now you just gave him more legitimacy and normalized him.
Right, Ms. Terry, as you just mentioned, China has been marginalized in this whole summit-making process of the two Koreas and the United States. How does this summit between President Xi and Kim Jong-un increase Beijing's leverage over North Korea?
Well, China, I think, always did have influence over North Korea. And because right now Kim Jong-un wants to also use China for either for later relaxation of sanctions or as an insurance card in case something goes wrong with Trump's summit. There's both interests here. From Kim Jong-un's perspective and from Xi Jinping's perspective, there was reasons to meet. So it just makes sense from both leaders' perspective.
Mr. Countryman, how has Beijing's leverage over North Korea increased?
Well, I'm not sure that the leverage has increased. I mean, use two different concepts, influence and leverage. Historically, Beijing has had great influence in North Korea. Under Kim Jong-un, they've had virtually none. But they still have leverage in terms of being the most important trading partner and the most important supplier of energy to North Korea. What the Trump administration has succeeded in doing, in part, is getting China to use some of that leverage and to put real economic pressure on North Korea. That leverage still exists. Kim Jong-un would like to be free of it. Xi would like to maintain the possibility of using that leverage in the future to push North Korea in the right direction.
So this summit between President Xi and Kim Jong-un served as a momentum that the two ties could be patched up. Are they going to ride this momentum and repair these relations?
I think it really depends on how Kim Jong-un proceeds in the future and what happens with Kim Jong-un and Trump summit and the meeting, what comes out of it. If Kim Jong-un is continuing to be on this peace offensive phase and there's no provocation and looks like he's willing to really shift away from this kind of provocations that he conducted last year, sure. But if he somehow comes back to sort of what we experienced last year, I think then we're going to be back to seeing China trying to exercise the leverage, sanctions and implementation of sanctions and pressure.
I think that's right. I expect that President Xi gave sympathy, he gave encouragement to Kim Jong-un. He did not give a blank check to go do whatever you want and China will support you.
And most importantly, looking forward, how is the repaired relationship between China and North Korea going to affect the upcoming summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un?
I don't think the relationship is repaired yet. And I think there is still grave concern in China about the way North Korea destabilizes the regional security situation. But certainly for Kim Jong-un, to know that he's told his story in Beijing has to give him greater confidence as he goes into his meeting with Mr. Trump.
Ms. Terry, how do you assess the upcoming summit between President Trump and Kim based on this summit between President Xi and Kim Jong-un?
I think it's really hard to tell exactly how this is going to play out because we have Trump as a wild card. I'm sure to prepare for this summit, the whole national security apparatus preparing a big trip summit preparation book, as you know. But will he read it? I mean, what will Trump actually do? I mean, there's a lot of unknowns here. But we'll see. I mean, I think this is really hard, too early to sort of say how it's going to go. I mean, it could go well. I think optimistically, the best case scenario is Kim Jong-un and Trump meet, they have some sort of chemistry, some sort of rapport, agree on some grandiose statement about commitment to denuclearization, and then sort of that's the beginning of the process and let other people, sort of lower level officials work it out.
Right.
But there's also risk that things can go bust. And then now, you use that engagement negotiation card, so what will you do after? So right now it's very important, I think all hands on deck to make sure that Kim Jong-un and Trump meeting goes well.
Right.
I think that's exactly right. Kim Jong-un knows this is complicated.
Yeah.
President Trump seems to think it's simple. I don't think that President Trump is going to read a big briefing book.
No.
That creates the risk that they will collide very early on and give up the process without fully exploring whether they could do something more. As I said before, I want to be optimistic. I think that the Republic of Korea and President Moon himself have a crucial role to play in preparing President Trump for these talks.
Well, we'll definitely have to wait and see how the developments on North Korea develop. And before we let you go, we take a quick look at a North Korea picture of the week. Now, this is a cartoon this week. It looks like Kim Jong-un is headed somewhere in a bulletproof train, looking somewhat grumpy, bored, and impatient. What do you make of this cartoon?
Go ahead.
Well, no, it's amusing. It looks like the beloved leader on his way to China. I've given up commenting whether editorial cartoons are fair or not. It reminds me, though, of the kind of impatience that certain American presidents show.
What do you think?
Maybe it's a larger point about are we there yet? We know that North Korea's actual long-term goal is getting that international acceptance of North Korea as a nuclear power. I don't know. It might not be just China. It could be just his impatience in general, trying to get to the final goal line.
Yeah, exactly. So I think he's definitely waiting to see if they're actually going to come to an agreement on whether Kim Jong-un wants, on what Kim Jong-un wants here. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Countryman and Ms. Terry, for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's all for today's Washington Talk, and from all of us at Voice of America, thanks for watching. This has been Connie Kim.